What's up, YouTube? Today we're going to go over cycles of function on a basic M9 9mm pistol. I told you guys the other day I was going to kind of go over that real quick. Same principle as the video with the AR-15. A lot of people just don't understand what's going on with the cycles of function while they're firing this weapon or any weapon that they have, especially if they're new shooters. So we're going to kind of run over the steps real fast. Hopefully people that aren't familiar with it will get a better understanding, and if you already know all this stuff, just enjoy the show, I guess. So here we have a standard 9mm M9. This is a 92 FS, basically. It's the same thing. It's made by Beretta. Was the service weapon for the U.S. military for quite a while, replacing the 45 ACP 1911 series. So cycles of function on this is pretty much the same as the AR. It just happens in a slightly different fashion because of the type of weapon this is. This is a blowback operated pistol, meaning that the force of the gas blows the slide assembly and the barrel backwards instead of there being a gas tube where the gas follows. So it's just blowback from pressure in the barrel, forcing it to the rear. So it's on cycles of function. The first thing we're going to cover is feeding. So obviously when your magazine is inserted, the round will be sitting here at the top. Your barrel assembly and slide will obviously be attached to the pistol. It'll be in the rear position, ready to load a round in, right? So when this thing travels forward, when you do the slide release on it, it's going to pick up a round out of the magazine from the bolt right here. I don't know if you guys can see this. It's going to strip a bullet from the magazine, and it's going to catch it on the bottom of the bolt face, right? And as it travels forward, and the barrel stays in the same position because of the locking lugs, that little ramp on the barrel there is going to force the bullet up into the chamber. It's also going to force the bullet up on the face of the bolt, clipping the rim on the cartridge into the extractor. So that's kind of an important thing. I just saw a video the other day where a guy was going over loading a pistol by dropping around in the chamber and just letting the slide slam forward. On some weapons, they're designed to do that, and it won't mess up your extractor. On others, it's probably not good to do that, and I didn't really think about that a whole lot until I saw that guy's video. Excuse me. Because I feel like most modern firearms can handle having a round slammed into the ejector like that, because it is beveled a little bit. There's a little bit of a ramp on the edge of most ejectors. I don't know if you can see that on this one here, but there is a little bit of a ramp on the ejector itself to allow a round to slide into it directly face on, as if you were slamming it in. So if it's not stripping it from the magazine and pushing it upwards, in my opinion, on this particular pistol, you could go ahead and let the slide roll forward on a round in the chamber, regardless of the magazine. Is it wear and tear on the extractor? Probably yes, it is. Will it break it? No, probably not. But if you do it thousands of times, it's probably going to put more wear on that extractor than normally would happen if you always chambered from the magazine. So just something to think about on that. I didn't really consider it. Obviously, some weapons like the AK and other things, like especially things that fire from the open bolt, they're designed to obviously chamber and lock to the face of the bolt from, slamming from the rear. Open bolt, kind of self-explanatory. Anyway, back to the M9. So once the round is clipped in and it starts going forward, we've accomplished feeding, which is the first step. The next step is going to be chambering, and that's when the bolt is all the way forward into the barrel, and the barrel comes up on its locking lugs in the back here and is into a stopped position by the lugs and the recess in the slide. So once that happens, you're now chambered, and you can go ahead and fire the weapon. Now on cocking, when the slide is in its rearwardmost position, the slide is going to force the hammer all the way to the rear. There's a firing pin block in the sear that keeps the hammer locked down to the back, like that, so it's ready to fire. As the slide moves all the way back to its forward position and is all put together again, You can then pull the trigger and the hammer will fly forward, striking the firing pin in the back of the bolt assembly, striking the primer and setting off the projectile. Once the round fires off, that gas pressure from inside the barrel is going to force the slide back to the rear against the face of the bolt with the cartridge still attached to it, the empty cartridge, now empty cartridge. So it's going to slide all the way back. It's going to, as soon as it clears the ejection port, that extractor and ejector is going to, the ejector is going to flip it out. That's this little notch right here is your ejector. As soon as the brass catches that, it's going to flip it out the ejection port, clearing it, and then it's going to start the whole cycle over again. After it's extracted and ejected, it'll go back into the next mode, which is forcing the hammer back all the way to the rearward position and locking it in place, and then it'll be coming back forward to feed another round. So it's very simple, just a little different because of the gas setup. Instead of having a gas tube to deal with and a carrier for the bolt just rides in the slide. And it's kind of important when you're doing maintenance on these to always check the interior of your slide where these grooves are for the barrel. Make sure that those grooves are clear of obstruction, debris, nicks, scratches, burrs, dents, and that's where you have a lot of metal or metal contact is inside these grooves here. So you always want to make sure you clean those very well. Make sure you're lubricating those grooves also, because that is where the lugs on this barrel move in and out of that slide, or traveling up and down the slide. So you want to make sure that's in good working order when you operate these. So very simple operation. Your ramp, similarly, you want to make sure that it is clean. This one's a little dirty because I just shot it. You want to make sure that ramp it looks good. It should have no nicks or obstructions to let the round slide up into the chamber. On the internals, you want to make sure that your extractor is in working condition, that it's not broken. There's no chips, dents, nicks, or anything like that. Similarly, you just want to make sure that all these little springs inside there are cleaned out. I'm not going to break this thing all the way down. The M9 is super easy to take care of. You don't need to be doing a lot of crazy stuff to it unless you're rolling around in a sand pit. So all these metal-to-metal contact areas are where you want to make sure they are lubricated and clean. Similarly, the hammer, you also want to make sure there's a little lubrication in that. Not a whole lot, because you don't want it gumming up on you. So that's pretty much it. It's very simple, basic operation functions. If you know, especially about the lockup on the barrel, how it doesn't rotate or tip as much as some other versions. Oh, I got a cat in my video. But you can definitely diagnose problems. Come here, you. You can definitely diagnose problems if you understand where metal-to-metal contact is happening, what's happening when the bolt goes all the way to the rear to begin to pick up the next round out of the magazine, what happens when it's going forward as far as sliding up into the catch on the extractor, and how the extractor clips the round in. So if you have a failure to feed, a failure to fire, failure to extract, if you understand what's going on as this slide and barrel assembly are moving back and forth, you can better diagnose your problem. So very simple operation. I just wanted to go over that with you guys. I know the M9's a pretty popular piece of equipment. It's been around for a long time, so there's nothing new in particular to talk about as far as these go. They've been pretty popular, I guess, in the civilian market. I mean, I bought one just because I'm familiar with it from military service, but I don't know if you have one of these or not, or if you've shot them before. But they are pretty convenient, very simple to maintain. You know, they're a little large for some people's hands, especially the grip. Very fat. Like if you had a smaller boned person, or maybe a female, they may have trouble gripping this grip because it is quite beefy to accommodate this magazine. but very popular weapon, and this disassembly and reassembly is very simple. There's no big secrets about how it goes back together. Just has this very simple lever on the side here. There's a button you push on the other side, and putting it back together is that easy. It does have a decock lever, so you can, if your hammer is cocked and you decide you don't want to shoot, you can click that decock lever down. It'll drop the hammer for you without striking the firing pin, rendering it safe. It also has a little bit of a half cock function, which I don't know anybody that uses that in particular. You can also cock it by hand. Now on this is a double action, single action pistol. So the first shot under normal circumstances is going to be a true double action trigger pull, depressing it all the way to the rear. Once the slide travels to the rear again and recocks the hammer, then from there forward it's going to be single action. So it's a much lighter trigger pull, much less to squeeze. A lot of people have trouble getting used to the double single switch. First round out of the, from a straight double action can be kind of tough. It may throw you off a little bit if you're jerking or you don't have very constant pressure on it. A lot of guys that are used to pulling the trigger with the pad of their finger kind of have trouble with the double action because they try to do that from the double action position. My recommendation on double action is to use the first joint on any double action, because you get a little more leverage on that thing, and then you're just kind of pulling it to the rear to complete the rearward motion of the trigger. If you do it correctly, you're not going to jerk the trigger very much. It's not going to go one direction or the other, but you have to have a very smooth motion to do it. So once you're in single action mode, then you can go back to that whole pad of the finger if that's what you prefer. I don't really do that on this type of pistol. I'll just use the same position because that's what I'm used to. But something to think about. One thing I will talk about real fast on this this pistol, and not just this pistol, but any semi-automatic pistol. If you're in a self-defense situation with one of these pistols, be advised that if you are too close to your opponent and they push forward or push to the rear on the barrel and slide assembly, they can actually take you out of battery and you won't be able to fire the weapon. Okay, now if you have really large hands, you can actually come up against somebody with a Beretta 92 in particular and actually disassemble it while they're pointing it at you if you're fighting, and you can rip the slide from them and hit them with it. So just something to keep in mind, guys. If you're too close to somebody and you do have this type of pistol, you want to make sure you keep your distance from them. That goes for any semi-automatic. You can be taken out of battery if they're grabbing on it and pushing that slide to the rear. Then it's not going to function and you're going to have a problem. So you need to make sure that you keep your weapon away from your intended target. Okay, so that's it. Real quick video on the M9. Not much to say about it. This is just a real standard version. It doesn't have any rails or anything on it like that. It's just your basic M9 with the lanyard hole and all that kind of stuff. So fun little pistol to shoot. I like it. I've never really carried this a whole lot. I have carried it in the past. It's just kind of big, but if you want the extra capacity that this provides, you can definitely do that. Plus, another thing I like about it is the longer barrel. It does give you a lot more velocity than, say, a shorter barrel does. Maybe not a whole lot more. If you watch some of Paul Harrell's stuff, he kind of gets into barrel length and velocities with 9mm. So you can watch his channel if you have some thoughts on that. But I do like the longer barrel on this and 1911s because you do get some more velocity out of it, out of the muzzle, than you do a shorter barrel. That can also help you with expansion if you're shooting hollow points or critical defense rounds, things like that. So that's all I wanted to talk about, guys, was just cycles of function on this thing. Very simple blowback operated pistol, nothing fancy. If you guys have any comments, leave them in the section below. Especially if you fired this in the service, I'd like to hear your opinion about it. I never had any problems with this in the years that I used it. I did start out with the 1911 in the Army. Had that for several years before we did receive the M9s. And I didn't have a problem with the M9. The ones we got, I guess, were a good batch. I always shot expert with it. Never had any